The transfer portal rankings are now complete. At 24/7 Sports, we underwent this entirely new feature over the past several months, the transfer portal rankings. I was in the meeting when the idea was born. I'm not going to go as far as to claim the idea, but I think it is a good idea. And I also think the approach we took is probably the best approach. Have several versions of these rankings, and I'll tell you why it's important. There is no start and stop on the transfer portal necessarily. There's not a date, like on signing day. We know when that is. Well, we don't know really when the wave's going to come for the transfer portal. We can guess. But my point is it starts before spring, and then you have spring. Then you have the second wave of transfers. And it's important to just keep getting feedback. You got a lot of guys that transfer, and you got them ranked high, and then we hear from their college staffs in some cases, this isn't what we expected to get. Damaged goods here. Injuries not healed from the neck up, he's a mess, whatever the feedback is, and then you adjust guys accordingly, and you can't do that if you just put out one set of rankings. So we updated these, and feedback was key on it, and I observed the process, and I believe in the rankings, so I'll endorse them. Let me say that. First takeaway, Georgia saw some movement here. Georgia's defensive backfield, if you were to go into the spring, knowing what we only knew in the spring, you would have said, oh boy, man, they're going to try and beat Clemson with a bunch of kids out there. Talented kids, but kids nonetheless. Well, then Tyke Smith comes in to man that nickel spot by way of West Virginia. He was, I think, 13th. We bumped him up to 9th. I say we. I'm not on this committee. So if they bomb, don't blame me. I just want the credit with none of the blame. Again, that's all I've ever asked for. But Tyke Smith goes from 13 to 9. And I'll also tell you another thing to keep an eye on. Darian Kendrick, who was the former five-star kid, defensive back at Clemson, transfers to Georgia. He is ranked, where we got him? We got him at 6th. Now, remember, he had some off-field issues. Last time we spoke, they were still in doubt. Well, those have been taken care of now, so he looks good to go this year. And so you got two big defensive back pieces figured out there. Also, Eric Gilbert sits at number 3, so it may very well be that you call Georgia the winner of this thing. They got to contend with USC and Oklahoma for that title, but they've been a big winner here. USC, speaking of the Trojans, they know exactly what they're doing. USC said, well, we got a lot to replace. I saw Chris Hummer actually did a feature with Spencer Harris, who's the director of player personnel at Southern Cal about a month ago. He said, it's not like we rang in the new year and said, all right, Happy New Year. What's our New Year's resolution? Let's take everyone we can from the transfer portal. Those were not his words. I'm paraphrasing his thoughts, but it's just a unique confluence of events. We try and use that word at least once a week. And they had to take a lot of guys. Well, they did. Southern Cal took 9 and counting guys from the transfer portal. 7 of them are ranked in our top 100. You got a couple of running backs that should see playing time this year. You got a couple of wide receivers, a tight end. I mean, they got a lot of guys on offense alone that you should watch them in week 1 and find yourself saying, oh, look, all the transfer portal guys are on the field. Southern Cal did what they needed to do. They understand. The coaching staff's not stupid. They know what time it is. And so all of those guys should be, in some shape, form, or fashion, impact players this year. There's a name that I don't think any of you know. Or let me put it in a finer point. If you do know this name, hats off to you. You are as diehard as it gets. Samori Toure is my guess on the pronunciation. But they know how to pronounce his name at Montana because the guy has amassed 2,500 receiving yards the past 3 years. So Samori Toure goes from Montana to Nebraska. Now, all the transfer portal talk about Nebraska has obviously been Wan'Dale Robinson leaving Lincoln and going back home to Kentucky to play for the Wildcats. Well, they quietly filled that void potentially with what could turn out to be the number 1 receiving option on their team, but it's a kid from Montana that you've never heard of, so it may catch you by surprise in week 1, 2, or 3 when he starts doing big things. He flew all the way up to number 40 overall in these rankings. He's our number 8 overall transfer portal wide receiver. And to be honest with you, these are my words, not the committee's words. I don't know that we really have an accurate gauge of where to put him. I think he's properly listed, but it could be that we get to the early portion of November and we say, the Montana kid that came down here to Nebraska, boy, man, they should have ranked him higher in retrospect. Who knows? That may be what we say in November. Notre Dame, to wrap this up, did something on their offensive line that may pay huge dividends. And it doesn't look like they did a whole lot, but if you're an Irish fan, you understand how imperative it was they do something there. Now, I don't think Notre Dame is going to be a massive year-in, year-out pursue the transfer portal at any cost type of program, but they needed to, and they were strategic about it. So they went and got Kane Madden. He, I think, has 31 overall starts. He came from Marshall, which was about as much as the rest of their guys had combined coming back. They're replacing like 3 or 4 starters in the offensive line. So they got Madden, and when you combine him with a couple of guys they got from the high school ranks that should be able to play, let's hope so, because they're going to need to play right away. This is a big focus for Notre Dame. We were talking about that Notre Dame-Wisconsin game a second ago. That's going to be one of the early gauges of how ready Notre Dame's offensive line is, because you're going to be seeing one on the other side of the field. It's going to be a line of scrimmage game. I mean, that's what football is in general, but some games more than others. That's where you'll see whether Notre Dame going into the transfer portal and the high school ranks, that recruiting, player development, does it pay off? Because that's one area that all Notre Dame fans have been focused on. And also, I wanted to hit a guy instead of just a team. Ty Chandler, I talked about him 2 months ago. Ty Chandler is my early pick for a guy that just nailed this thing. Ended up in the perfect spot. I think Ty Chandler is just like Eric Gray, really. They both left Tennessee. One of them went to Oklahoma and Eric Gray. The other goes to North Carolina and Ty Chandler. I think it's a godsend for both of them. Ty Chandler's played a lot of football. And he's dropped into a situation where they're replacing a couple of 1,000-plus yard rushers. They've got their entire offensive line back pretty much at North Carolina. It's just a ready-made situation. It's a much more favorable offense for his skill set. So Ty Chandler, I was talking to Trey Scott the other day, and it's like finishing each other's sentences. I think he feels the same way I do about it. Ty Chandler is a guy that I would really watch because it's about fit. Fit. I can't remember off the top of my head whether Daquan Newkirk is ranked in our top 100. But Newkirk's a guy who went to Florida, not rated all that highly, but yet that coaching staff says, hey, he's a good fit. It's about fit. Fit is the name of the game in the transfer portal.